On its own, Resident Evil has become a massive series that has connected with so many fans throughout the decades. With a franchise that has reinvented itself multiple times and a different trilogy for each generation of gamers, it's no wonder why the RE series has so many diehard fans out there. And with such a dedicated fan base, we also find new and exciting ways to make the games feel fresh and new to add replayability to our favorite games in the series. This of course comes in the form of mods. So in this episode, we're taking a look at all the different mods of the franchise as I give you guys my personal list of favorite mods for Resident Evil. Before we get started, I just want to let you guys know that this list will not feature any mods that are used to make fan-made games. Honestly, fan-made Resident Evil games really deserve their own list, so stay tuned for that in the near future. That goes for reskin mods too, as there are a lot of them and I'd rather cover all of them in a separate video as well. Also, I want to give as much credit to the developers that brought us these amazing mods. So in the description, I'll have the name of the mod and the name of the modders that created them, so long as I can find that information. Finally, while I'm putting this list in order, like most of my videos, the fact is that all of these mods are fantastic and straight up, you could probably move any entry to any spot on this list and I'll still think it's a solid ranking. And if you have a PC, then I highly recommend trying out all of these mods in today's video. So let's get this party started. My name is Ruben with Nerdspace Games and this is my top 10 best Resident Evil mods. Let's get it. Number 10, Xtreme Nightmare, Resident Evil 2 Remake. Most people that have played and beat Resident Evil 2 Remake would agree that the scariest part about that game was Mr. X, due to the fact that he was basically invincible and he could follow you throughout the entire RPD station. Mr. X proved to be the scariest and the biggest obstacle in your way. Plus, when you add the feeling of anxiety that you get when you hear him stomping around in nearby rooms, then you begin to realize that this guy is the absolute worst. Well, since he is the most intimidating and terrifying monster of the remake, of course fans jumped on the opportunity of making him even more dangerous, because obviously that makes perfect sense. While one Mr. X was enough to get your heart racing, an entire RPD station full of them is literally a living nightmare. Thanks to Maverick0110, a mod was created where every single regular enemy in the game are transformed into another Mr. X. This means that instead of you running from one terrifying Mr. X, you're running from an entire horde of them. Good luck. Number 9, Item Box, Resident Evil 0. RE0 is a game that I personally like, but it's also regarded as one of the most frustrating games of the franchise. Actually, the game received a lot of mixed reviews, with some people downright calling it the worst of the mainline series. Now, obviously, I don't agree with that, but I do admit that the game does suffer from a lot. And according to most fans, the biggest issue comes from the lack of an item box. See, Resident Evil 0 included some new mechanics, one of which was the fact that the player can drop items and leave them behind. The problem here comes from the fact that there was no item box like we had in previous installments of the series. Because of the lack of an item box, it meant that the players would have to constantly backtrack a lot in order to retrieve key items needed to progress the story. This became extremely frustrating and annoyed a lot of players. Well, last year a new mod came out that would change this mechanic and make Resident Evil 0 a much better experience. Sorry if I mispronounced this, but thanks to the modder known as Descawed, a new mod added an item box mechanic to Resident Evil 0. All the player had to do now was to head over to their typewriter and click use, and it'll give them access to their item box. Sure, visually you don't get to see the iconic item box like you do in previous games, but at least the mechanic is there to make your playthrough of Resident Evil 0 go more smoothly. Number 8, Berserker Mod, Resident Evil 4 Remake. As one of the newest and most popular mods to hit the scenes this year, the Berserker mod for Resident Evil 4 Remake is a must-play for those who's looking for a massive challenge. As you would have guessed, the Berserker mod is essentially a new mode in which it adds more enemies and also makes them more dangerous. More importantly though, Berserker also changes up the type of enemies you face and when you face them. For example, you won't be able to keep count of how many chainsaw enemies you'll come across in this playthrough. Not to mention you'll get variants of them, some with faster, more powerful attacks. Another pretty cool change is the inclusion of extra boss fights and stalker-like encounters. For example, Berserker takes elements from separate ways and adds them to more dangerous situations in the main campaign of the game. Leon will now have Chief Mendez as a stalker enemy briefly in the village, to the point where you'll have to find yourself dealing with him and a chainsaw enemy at the same time. You'll fight the Verdugo and Pasanta in different sections of this game as well. The list goes on, and honestly, trying to go over everything that this mod changes would literally take hours. Developed by Rabbit2NeatIM, this mod promises to give you your biggest challenge ever with more enemies, new areas to explore, more puzzles, and many more surprises waiting for you. Number 7. Night Terror, Resident Evil 5. While currently having only 3 chapters available, KamiA's Night Terror mod completely changes Resident Evil 5 as it goes towards a more horror direction. Night Terror does everything the Berserker mod does, but in a way that makes Resident Evil 5 a scary game, something that Capcom failed to do with the original release. The mod adds more enemy variety while also including additional boss fights. To name a few examples, the woman that you see attack earlier in the original game is now a stalker enemy that literally chases you throughout the game. And honestly, she kind of kicks your ass. Then you have additional bosses in certain fights, like facing off against 3 executioners in the village standoff scene, or even 3 test subjects in the battle by the incinerator. For more details on this mod though, I'd actually like to recommend a friend's video, Rabbit Crafter. He goes into full detail about each of the changes and how impressive this mod is.
This mod completely changes the game in every aspect. The atmosphere and level design has been entirely reworked, enemy spawns have been revamped, the mod also adds save rooms to the game, and so much more.
I'll leave a link to that video in the description, but just know that if you're a fan of the Berserker mod, then you're going to love Night Terror even more. Number 6. Magic Zombie Door, Resident Evil 1.5. If you're a hardcore fan of the RE franchise, then there's a strong chance that you've heard of a little game called Resident Evil 1.5. This game is essentially what was supposed to be RE2, but Capcom scrapped it after completing about 80% of it in favor of going in a different direction. But while this game never received an official release, Resident Evil 1.5 was leaked to the public years later in 2013. And as you would expect from an incomplete game, Resident Evil 1.5 was borderline unplayable. That is until the Magic Zombie Door mod was created by the modder, MartinBiohazard. This mod basically added enemies, reused assets from RE2, and connected rooms together to give us a more fleshed out and playable version of Resident Evil 1.5. While not perfect, the Magic Zombie Door mod allowed fans to experience what Capcom had originally planned for its sequel and basically gave us a whole new RE game to explore. Number 5. World S, Resident Evil 4. By now, you've seen both RE4 Remake's Berserker mod and RE5's Night Terror mod, but in my opinion, there is one that has the same area of expertise that stands out a little more. Allow me to introduce you to Resident Evil 4 World S. This is a completely new way to play the original RE4. Developed by Corazon, this mod includes all of the features that you've seen in the Berserker mod and the Night Terror mod, but with a lot more unique and creative features. With 28 new maps to explore, more puzzles, new enemy types, more items, and disturbing locations with more atmospheric horror than we saw in the original RE4 story, World S is a completely new experience to enjoy if you're a fan of the original Resident Evil 4. Hell, you even have a cool new outfit for Leon to rock, as he's kicking ass, of course. The only downside to this mod, outside of a few technical problems here and there, is that it's not complete. Currently, Corazon only has the first chapter completed. But man, let me tell you, it's enough to keep you interested for at least a few hours, probably more. Number 4, Resident Evil 4 HD Project. While there have been plenty of mods created that enhance different Resident Evil games, only 2 really stand out from the rest, one of which is the Resident Evil 4 HD Project created by Albert and Cris. This duo managed to completely upgrade every single part of the original Resident Evil 4 game, and honestly, they did a better job than most AAA remasters out there. This project was one that was created out of passion and took nearly 10 years to complete. The RE4 HD project manages to enhance the visuals while also making changes to the atmosphere and facial features that help improve the game overall. Even though I'm showing you clips from the HD project right now, honestly, this is something that you have to experience for yourself because YouTube does not do this mod justice. If you're a fan of the original RE4, then I highly recommend getting this mod. It'll make the game so much more clear and sharp, and it especially looks great during combat. Sure, Resident Evil 4 is a game that you probably wouldn't really need an enhanced version of, as it's one of those games that age pretty well. But your feelings will probably change completely after experiencing what this mod has to offer. Number 3, Biorand Classic Trilogy, Replaying old school Resident Evil games is something that I find myself doing so often that I pretty much have the Spencer Mansion and the RPD station floor plans memorized. I can tell you exactly what's behind most of the doors in each of these buildings. And while that does take some excitement out of replaying these games, the fact is that I just love the classic trilogy so much that I just don't care. Well, I at least didn't think I cared as much. That was until I came across Randomizers, and more specifically Biorand. Randomizers and arrange mods are basically seen in just about every single game of the franchise. However, Biorand's randomizer of the classic trilogy is by far my favorite one to use. Since I pretty much have the classic trilogy memorized, Biorand's randomizer gives me a new way to enjoy all of my favorite games while still giving me a fresh new take on them. This randomizer can randomize room locations, key items, enemies, and hell, even cutscenes, which kind of gets a little crazy. It adds a new level of difficulty while also making games that I had memorized completely unpredictable and exciting. Just like every mod, the randomizer isn't perfect, but it's by far one of my favorite mods, and when you combine it with an entry on this list that we'll get to later on, then you have a match made in heaven for hardcore fans of that original trilogy. Okay, I know what some of you guys are probably thinking right about now. Recency bias much? Well, to be fair, maybe you're right. But as a hardcore fan of the original Resident Evil games, I can't help but love the ability to play RE2 Remake in fixed camera mode. First off, I want to thank Alphazomega for creating this mod because honestly, I almost put this as number 1. That's how much I truly enjoy playing it. This mod keeps the visuals that we see in Capcom's 2019 remake while also capitalizing on the nostalgia of the original trilogy. In this mod, we're treated to over 1,700 fixed camera angles, giving us a new look at the modern RPD station. On top of the iconic fixed camera angles, this new mod also brings back tank controls. You'll need to use the D-pad for movement and use quick turns to move around faster during combat. This game reminds me of why I'm so excited for the upcoming indie horror game, Echoes of the Living. I've always wanted a fixed camera angle RE game, but with modern graphics. And now I can say that I finally have that with this mod. Sure, there have been plenty of mods out there created for other RE games that changes the gameplay to fixed camera angles, but none of them did it this well. After finishing this mod, it kind of gets me thinking more about why Capcom won't just include a fixed camera mode for future RE games. We've seen them do first person and third person in Village, so I imagine a fixed camera perspective won't be that difficult to include in future entries. Still, if you're an old school fan of Resident Evil, or hell, if you're just looking for a new way to experience the masterpiece that is Resident Evil 2 Remake, then I highly recommend that you check this mod out. Number 1, Seamless HD Project Classic Trilogy. As I kind of teased when I was talking about Biorand Randomizer mod, the Seamless HD Project mod is hands down my favorite mod of all time. This should really come to no surprise to any of you guys, as I absolutely love the original trilogy. Hell, the top 3 mods on this list are influenced by that trilogy in some way. However, what really makes the Seamless HD project so iconic and absolutely groundbreaking comes from the fact that this team did what Capcom refuses to do all of these years. Taking the Rebirth mod for the original trilogy, the SHDP team turned around and enhanced it to make each game look visually more impressive. So impressive, in fact, that it rivals some of the best HD remasters out there. Considering that these games are not available on modern consoles, the Seamless HD project is the definitive way to play the original trilogy today. From turning the faces of the characters from blurs into actual faces to enhancing the atmosphere in a way that makes you appreciate the Spencer Mansion and the RPD station even more. The Seamless HD project does not miss a single beat on improving every aspect of the original games. Honestly, Capcom should really think about hiring these developers and letting them take the lead on developing a classic HD trilogy for modern consoles, because this is damn near perfect, I'm not gonna lie. I really believe that not even Capcom can do a better job than these guys did. Now, anytime that I want to play any of the original trilogy games, I don't even think twice. I go straight for the PC and play the Seamless HD project. And as I said earlier, I can combine this mod with the Biorand Randomizer mod. In fact, they work perfectly together, and it gives a fresh new playthrough on a more gorgeous looking version of my favorite video games of all time. What could be better than that? Well, that's it for today's episode of Nerd Space Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what your favorite Resident Evil mod is. Did it make my list? Let me know down below. Anyway, thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.